intervention, which is your birth to 3, preschool 3 to 5-year-olds, and then school age, which is 5 to 21-year-olds. The process for special education is very similar to preschool, where students are referred and evaluated for eligibility. The thing that would change most with the alphabet soup that special education has is the family service plan is just an individual education plan. And then you're looking at placement, instruction for students, with an annual process to review that eligibility as we work on skills and goals for students. From initial evaluation, it is a 60-day requirement that consists of determining whether this child has a disability under IDEA for school age and to determine the educational needs of the child. Those assessments can include everything that is appropriate based on what is suspected. So that could include vision, health screenings, social, emotional, cognitive, and intelligence testing, communication, and motor. Under IDEA, there are 13 categories that, I think I froze again. How are we doing?
You're good, you're good.
Okay. There are 13 categories for a student that must be classified in order to get services under special education. You see the list here, and I don't know that I need to read them all. I'll just give you a second to peruse the list. But a student, in order to be eligible, must have evaluations and eligibility met and go under one of these categories. There is such a thing as primary and secondary classification, so that's where you could have a child that is autistic and then also maybe hearing impaired, so that you would do, but there needs to be a main classification. The key for eligibility is that you can still have what might be considered a disability, but it must impact the learning in order to meet eligibility under the school age IDEA. And so, as I said, those assessments are going to be very comprehensive in order to determine the needs of the child. We could include the academic, psychological, speech, OT. You do look for specific learning disabilities, autism spectrum disorder, and then vision impairment. Assistive technology is provided to students with school age. The reason I pull this out a little bit is, while it could be a direct service, assistive technology and an individual education plan can fall in several areas. It's not just a related service, it can also be just a supplementary fee, or it could be consultation. So we have assistive technology for the classroom. We have assistive technology that would go along with occupational therapy, with physical therapy, speech therapy if it's augmentative communication. And so those things would be listed differently depending on the needs of the child and the IEP. That is for evaluation and for the materials equipment is provided free to students under IDEA. What can you expect when you have children moving from preschool to school age? We do have a very extensive transition process. It doesn't just get left to just happen and hope that everything happens smooth. So there is a transition team that will work with the preschool team to ensure that students that are being evaluated for school age are followed through, so that we try to make that process as seamless as possible as students move from preschool into kindergarten. I'm going to talk a little bit about what services you can expect at special education. The first ability is wondering where are the students placed. So placement is number one. We do follow least restrictive environment. So to the maximum extent possible, students should be in a regular education classroom with their.
So earlier we talked about that group of people, right, in the committee, and I know I see a familiar face.
There'll be some that might be in a resource room. special education teacher will have them for a portion of the day, and then the student will go back into a regular classroom. And then we do have what you would expect to be a self-contained classroom where students are in that resource room setting most of their day. These are the related services that are provided. We have speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, there's autism consultation and training, leisure education, assistive technology. We have consultation and support for students with emotional disabilities, psychological services, vision services, and services for the deaf and hard of hearing. What do these services include? They can start just from screening and assessment, and again, if there is eligibility, we'll continue. If not, we'll just have some good information on the child. There's also direct service. That's where one of the therapists will work actually with the child for a certain predetermined number of minutes, a week or a month or a school year. Again, that will all be driven by the student's individual education plan. And then there's also a form of delivery where these therapists consult either with parents or with the teachers and don't provide direct service because the child doesn't need that level. So examples of that may be students that have difficulty writing, and it's really because they need a low-tech device like a pencil grip, and you teach children how to properly hold a pencil. That would be something that an occupational therapist could do with consultation and training. The other overall service is academic, which would be in a resource room by a special education teacher. And the student that does get services for academics must have in their IEP explanation of services for specialized instruction. It is a requirement. Again, we have the consultation and training I was going to pull out because that is something that is very common, that sometimes we just need to evaluate children. They find out that there's a need. They might not be as severe to warrant the need for services, but it is something that these therapists can do, working with teachers on consultation for techniques, strategies, etc. Our other consultants we have is what's called consultants, research teachers. They're technical assistance people, and then they would work with students and their education teams, and we have those with autism, assistive technology, and leisure education. You can expect that in an IEP is very specific. It really is the roadmap of what services are going to be delivered, and it would specify whether or not this training would go to the educational team, to the parents, students, or all of the above. We talk a little bit about support because between the alphabet soup that everybody has to learn for all the acronyms for services and IEPs and meeting, we do have what would be like case managers that oversee all of the schools. So we have at the elementary level individuals that are called individual education plan consultants, IEPCs. And at the middle and high school level, you'll hear their names as CRTs, consultant resource teachers. And what they basically do is they help with maintaining all the necessary legal documentation required at the district. They often are the ones that help arrange meeting times and coordinate routines, communicate timelines. Okay, we're going to have an annual review coming up for a child that needs evaluation, and we'll just ensure that that process is there both on the sides of the parents and of the district to help everybody bring it all together. They are also the ones that, as a team, would submit all the documents to the district to make sure that we have everything we need and just provide general technical assistance. It's very nice to have. As I end up on related services, not all related services are only delivered in person and on island. We have had to reach out. So for hearing evaluations, Guam For several years, though we had lost some property up the Keeson, don't have our own hearing group anymore, so now we are contracting with Guam Hearing for evaluation. We do still have audiologists, you'll hear about that later when I do the deaf and hard of hearing program. Our occupational therapy right now is delivered by a company called Tiny Eye. They are excellent, it is teletherapy, and students, you might be familiar at home, would have a parent as called an e-helper. But at school, it might be one of the school personnel, a teacher, or an aide assigned to that child. And the company would evaluate students just as if they were on island. Materials are mailed out to us so that we have all the appropriate fluids for those sessions with students. And the OT delivers service with whoever is working with the student on Guam. We also have off-island autism consultation and training through active behavior services right now that we're fortunate to have for consultation. Before I go into some of the DHH, should I take a breath between the process and all of those services that we have? If anybody has any questions, we want to save those at the end.
Any questions, anyone? We can relate to Rochelle.
Keep going?
Yeah, no questions so far.
Okay.
If there's a request to talk more about the Leisuread,
Leisuread? To request more to talk about the Leisuread?
Sure. So Leisuread is, it can be used either as adapted phys ed for our students with multiple disabilities. It is a teacher that will work with teens on social skills, on basic gross motor, not in the PT realm, more of the physical education realm and fun for leisure education. And so right now we have 2 teachers that are Leisuread teachers who provide services to students. So that also is a related service that is on an IEP.
thank you.
Thank you.
Quite welcome.
Any other questions? No.
We'll still have plenty of time to do that. So right now for our services, oh, sorry.
One question.
Yeah, of course.
So I have family members, they live here on Guam, and so my kids have given birth to, and I just want to say that, I'm deaf, and so how do I participate? I feel bad when I can't participate. This is a deaf individual. She's saying that when during her time of growing up here on Guam, her mom, her parents, and everybody that was around her before, when she was born, also plenty deaf babies, there's a lot of deaf babies. But I was 3 years old when they found out I was deaf, and when I was 6 years old, I moved to California. And my mom had decided, and my grandma, everybody had decided this was something we wanted to do, to move to the States, to help learn sign language, because there was nothing here on Guam for the deaf, so signing really wasn't included here on Guam. I just want to know if maybe the States, like elementary schools, have signing services, or provide sign languages services for parents or grandparents, that we can be involved as well. Because my mom and dad could never ever help me before. They never ever included them. So it's really sad. Is that something you do now? And up till now, and that was back in
1977.
1977,
When she had to leave.
when she was 12 years old, and she flew back. So, yes, and so I knew sign then, it was good, but to have parents included, they were never really involved. My parents didn't learn signs, so really what they used was speech and talk, and that's not something I learned. So, is there a way maybe we can get deaf role models to come into the schools, you know, maybe to help teach more signs, expose them to deaf, so by the time they graduate at 12th grade, they'll be able and more easier to transition into programs. You know, we want to help the deaf kids as much as we can. It's really sad to see what's happening now. Thank you for listening.
Absolutely. So Guam Department of Education does take a total communication approach for the deaf and hard of hearing. Where students that do need and use American Sign Language do have interpreters. We have, I was going to go through that with this slide, so it's perfect. I'll just move me right into it. We do have 3 schools that have regional programs, an elementary school, middle school, and high school. Right now at JFK, we have like about 11 deaf students that require interpreters, so we do have interpreters. They don't all have their own, unfortunately, at the moment. But when they're in class together, you know, they do have one interpreter for the 2 students in the same. We try to work on the schedule so that they do have interpreting for all of their classes, and do have classes. There's also some community outreach with an organization that's been doing sign language training for parents and pairing up with the GCC program too. And people started, and the instructor and the lead of the program there has been doing some sign language these past few months online. So yes, we try to have as much of a comprehensive, like I said, we even have our own audiologist, but we don't have the sound booth to be able to do the hearing evaluations. So right now we contract with Guam Hearing, who does those evaluations for us, and our audiologist who would attend meetings and interpret. We do hearing screenings for many of our students. Every year, our kindergarten, 3rd, 5th, 7th, and I believe 11th grade students all get hearing screenings so that we can make sure we are always step ahead and try to catch everybody that we have a need. We do have the interpreter services, and then we do have special ed teachers that we also have some time with students if needed out of the general education. The idea is for our students that are deaf and hard of hearing to spend as much time as possible in the regular education classes with their same age peers. I hope that also answers the question to what's available in the signing. We do that, and if we have students whose teachers need to learn, obviously, that they would get us training that they would need as well.
So Mr. Neal, real quick, I think also she posed the question, and correct me if I'm wrong, with regards to assisting the families, right, to communicate with their child who has been identified as deaf and hard of hearing. If it's built into the individualized education plan, also known as the IEP, that parents are also in need of training, then therefore it's mandated, right? That GDOE also provide the training for the parents as well as the teachers and the students to receive.
I'll be honest, I have not seen an IEP for training for parents. Most of the parents, we make sure is that they come to us because they sign at home. And so they want their child to have sign language with an interpreter at school. Honestly, I've not seen us to do parent training as part of an IEP.
But I have seen, not necessarily for the sign language, but
Right.
like, for example, if there is a certain type of equipment that,
Absolutely.
an assistive technology that is stated in the IEP that the student needs in order to progress academically, socially, physically, whatever it may be, and training it is needed for parents, as long as it's written in the IEP, it must be provided according to IDEA, the law, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So parents or whoever is the caregiver or guardian, if it's stipulated that they are also in need of the training, then it must be provided by the LE, the local educational agency.
Yes, I recognize that voice, half a day.
Half a day, thank you.
So I was just gonna get into that portion, that's where I think I was going with this is, so there is gonna be technology and accommodations that are needed for a student, and that is where, as Michelle is saying, that would come into the IEP for training and support for all of these things. So we have students that would have hearing aids or FM systems. We need training for new staff on the maintenance of that equipment. Some sign language, make sure if they know that kids need closed captioning and have special digital devices with note taking, etc. Yes, that is put in the IEP, and then our teachers do make sure that that training takes place.
Neil, we have another question.
Absolutely.
So the question is, if there's equipment that a child needs, is that equipment, is that child able to take that equipment home?
Generally, it is for in school. I have been an advocate for things that I don't understand, and I like to try to be looking at that. That's something that's fairly new is things like the classroom equipment or FM systems would stay in school. I have a problem with hearing aids, and that's always been an issue. So the school buys the hearing aids, but then they, I don't understand how we just have kids here at school and say we're going to take your ears off at night. So generally, that kind of stuff would be going back and forth. And any of the digital devices, I know there was a time where students would take their laptops home and things like that. It has even taken care of that as well, but personally, I do think those things should be used. We want our children to, if this is a part of their life, I don't say life is only the 6 hours you're at school, right? Life is a whole lot more hours outside of school, so I try to make sure that we can accommodate that as much as possible. And if it is an issue, we would be working, we have, Michelle's GSAT and other organizations that we can help families with equipment if it's needed for the home and it's not appropriate for school or school purchase. We try to reach out and work in the community to make sure that families and children get everything that they need.
Thanks for that, Mr. Neal. There's also another question, but just since Mr. Neal brought up the GSAT, we have our upcoming big conference, and we're going to also have some mini workshops regarding Guam systems for assistive technology. We are bringing in a national guest from the mainland. Her name is Dr. Gretchen Colade. She is a wonderful, wonderful presenter, and she really knows the ins and outs, especially regarding the IEP that Mr. Neal mentioned, and how you can, gather data and figure out which is the right AT equipment to be used, and how it can be written into the IEP. So we will keep you abreast on that. So if we have your email address, we'll make sure that we send you the notice of that upcoming conference. Mr. Neal, a question that was asked is if, because a lot of our guests here is from the daycare center. So they are daycare, child care providers. And if they notice something that's unusual, that's not really what you would consider normal, what can they do to refer a child?
They would contact the Office of Special Education, and somebody could help them. Our parent services, which is Laura Tyson right now. But there is child find is required, daycares too. And so yes, you contact special ed and let us know that if there's a child out there that needs some services, and people would guide you through the appropriate paperwork, etc. For daycare, I would send you right to Portia, and I'm sure she'd be able to help. So I am in charge of most of the direct services and school age. That is not an expertise of mine, and I don't like to pretend I have all the answers for everything, but there is a process for that, and that daycare centers is often where some of the child find does happen.
Right, so Mr. Neal is referring to our parent services coordinator at the Guam Department of Education. Her name is Laura Tyson, and I can give you her number. It's 300-1322 or 3. Anytime you have a question, we can also link you with her. So, just We can get your name today and number, and we'll make sure that we send you that referral form.
I should say that Guam Assistive Technology wasn't, a paid advertisement or anything, and I didn't recall that Michelle was going to be there, but, really, I would hope, things have evolved over years, and I'm proud of what I see in the past 2 years. We don't just say those things. We do work very collaboratively. None of us can do this together, right? Alone. I think we all need each other. There are things that schools can't be the answers for everything, and we have a community, and we are fortunate on Guam to have those kinds of services. So I try to reach out. Assistive Technology has been awesome. We have equipment that's on island that we have to order special for students. It takes time through that procurement process and then shipping if you try to get anything technological since COVID started. And we've been able to have parents and families borrow the equipment that is housed at Guam Assistive Technology until equipment's come in and try to get things seamless as possible. So that's just something I think that we do for the good of our community and the good of our students. Leads into parent services, which is the information, and you just got a phone number, is that as part of IDA requirement, you're also supposed to have stakeholder input and groups. It has to do a little bit with funding and updating on what our performance is for our students with disabilities. But it's a very active group called GAPSD. It's the Guam Advisory Panel for Students with Disabilities. They're appointed positions by the superintendent, but they're recommended by anybody, and anybody can be a stakeholder. And so this is a group of parents where we do provide monthly training for them on all those related services that I spoke about. We'll do a monthly session where a different one is highlighted so parents can see what that service is about, the kinds of things the therapist does, answer any questions they have, give ideas of things to do at home that would help. And then we also have more formal meetings where we do talk about the students and our student performance, how we do on reading and math for our students. Are we meeting all of the compulsory timelines from the referral until the student is actually identified and served? And so that is some parent support that parents can find. I can have that slide. I believe if you have handouts, you will have all of this and the contact information for parent services and special ed department. And it's a lot of information. So I think I'm going to stop to share and take a breath. And when I went on New York, it was a lot, but I want to make sure that I